ears on the base play pizzicato.
Come on, come all, and welcome, New World Supernova here, and today I want to have a little talk about One Piece. Now, currently we're up to chapter 996, so we're only 4 chapters off the mighty chapter 1000, and before that sort of timeline starts to get ahead of us, I wanted to just have a little talk and drop a little theory that I've got bubbling around in my head about the final form of Gear 4. So, Gear 4, obviously Luffy's newest form. It's been shown quite a bit now since Dressrosa, I think 2016 is when Gear 4 came out. So it's been 4 years now, so the whole entirety of Wano we've had it, Whole Cake Island, Dressrosa's ending is where it was introduced in that. And so pretty much the way you can look at Gear 4 to me, and this is how I view it, and I'll lead up to what I think the new form will be for it. I think more specifically we're not going to jump straight to a Gear 5 or an Awakening. I think we really are just going to get 4 forms of Gear 4, hence the name Gear 4. And those 4 forms will be based on very different things. That being said, one thing I am sort of confident in saying is I don't think out of the time skip Luffy had all 4 forms. I think the only forms he had was Bounce Man, Tank Man, Snake Man. My reasoning for this is I think that the new form is going to be heavily reliant on the use of Rio or Advanced Armament Haki. But I'll get to that in a second. So, the first thing that I really wanted to sort of touch on here is if you go back and actually look at what Gear 4 is, like, Luffy's inflating his body, using Armament Haki to really sort of hold everything in the right places and just sort of retain that elasticity while also being as powerful and having the Armament Haki as possible. But if we take a look at it, I think a few people actually have sort of come to this conclusion as well. The first form, Bounce Man, I think was a bit of a showcasing that it's actually the all-round version of Gear 4. I think all the other forms are going to heavily rely on one aspect or one thing showcased in Bounce Man. And I think the reasoning for that is Bounce Man is sort of just the generic all-rounder. I'll get to that in a second though. So, you have Bounce Man, all-rounder in my opinion. Then we go over to Tank Man, which is the upgraded version of the Fusion, which is Fusen, however you say it in Japanese, which is Luffy's balloon body, where he inflates himself to take as much impact as possible, puts the Haki on it as well, so he's not going to be pierced or punctured. And it's only been used once, to great effect, but it's still something that there might be more to do with that comes out. But I think it's only in really, really finite situations where Luffy even needs or wants to use it. Then we swap over to Snake Man, which was introduced against Katakuri and Whole Cake Island. And a lot of people go, oh, okay, this is a form that heavily relies on Luffy's Observation Haki. He couldn't use it without his Observation Haki. And although I think the Observation Haki really boosts the way that Luffy is able to use Snake Man, I don't think it's actually per se that he needs the Observation Haki for it. It just synergetically boosts. They really rely on each other, if that makes sense. Just with how fast it is. And the actual official Viz description of this, and I've got the whole physical manga collection over here to the left, so I can always whip it out to get the exact specific wording for it. But as he punches, every time the fist changes direction in Snake Man, that Geppo, where he's essentially using Skywalk with a punch. So every time it Geppos and changes direction, it's actually supposed to be gaining more speed. So it speeds up the more you dodge it until it hits you, which is very impressive. But Snake Man is by far Luffy's fastest gear. Tank Man being the all-rounder, Bounce Man being the all-rounder, Tank Man being the defense, Snake Man being the speed form. And so I'm going to take a moment before talking about the new form, go back and actually talk about where these forms came from, or at least narratively where Oda drew the inspiration from, in a linear fashion, going off people he's fought in the past or things he's fought in the past. With the exception of Tank Man, in my opinion, just being an upgraded version of his fusion, it doesn't actually follow this because it's not a combative form, it's a defensive form. So it's not going to follow this same pattern to me as to what Luffy's power-up is, okay? So if we go back all the way to Jaya, and a lot of people might be like, Jaya, why is that important? Well, Jaya and the Sky Pier arc, they're very heavily linked with the Dressrosa arc where Gear 4 was introduced. And a lot of people might have picked up on this, might not have picked up on this, but thematically, Luffy's Gear 4 form Bounce Man is very similar to, in attack, to Bellamy's Spring ability. And it's very fitting as well that Luffy in Gear 4 beats Doflamingo, the person suppressing Bellamy, with moves based off Bellamy's attacks. So Luffy's Kongan and whatnot, he uses that same technique that Bellamy uses, where he brings his arm back in, springing his arm in before unleashing the punch, to add extra force to it and the elasticity and all that. So if you look at the physical fists and that sort of side of Gear 4 Bounce Man, that is sort of inspired off of Bellamy by far. To a lesser extent, but visually included, you've got the Neo and the Rajan Infusion, all that sort of stuff. But if you look at Enel's final form, he actually does the Neo pose and goes big and gets the lightning cloud going around him, very similar to Luffy's form. So you can almost look at those side and side, that Luffy, much like how in Water 7, when Luffy encountered CP9 and all that, he developed Gear 2, Gear 3, you can look at Luffy in his time skip, sort of thinking back to those people and how they use their abilities, and taking inspiration for them to make his new form and improve throughout the way. So you have the fists coming from Bellamy, and you have the sort of visual the visual boost given to Luffy through Enel, and how that powered up his attacks, made him bigger, stronger, sort of thing, even though it was sort of glossed over very quickly in the story. Then moving on from there, again, not including Tank Man, the next form Luffy gets is in Eni's Lobby. And in Eni's Lobby, the first form Luffy showcases is Gear 4 Snake Man. Sorry, Gear 2. But it's very similar to Gear 4 Snake Man, where you can take a look at the two of them. They're both speed-based forms. They increase his power up and allow him to just essentially fight against that next tier of opponent for longer. Even though Luffy was already fighting those top tiers in Bounce Man, Snake Man really let him sort of, even if he wasn't hitting as hard, he was staying in the fight for longer, surviving for longer. So it really was that power up, very similar to Gear 2, where he's able to evade more attacks, and that makes him a lot more devastating in combat. So if I'm drawing the parallel between Gear 2 and Snake Man, you might see the pattern next, where I think there's another power up coming through, where you have a new form of Gear 4 being sort of similar to Gear 3. That would be incorrect. Yes and no, I should say. There is a new form, and I think it is based off Water 7. But I think Luffy's only come up with it now. And more importantly, I don't think it's a Gear 3 style like Gear 2 was. I think what we're actually going to be dealing with here is Gear 2 was Luffy seeing how Geppo worked and trying to apply it to his own body, and using that stimulus to pump his blood to make him move faster and have faster reflexes and all that sort of stuff. Snake Man, very similar. He's trying to use his Gear 2 aspects of Gear 4 to boost his speed and striking power, while using Geppo, the same that he uses to actually create Gear 2, to actually use his punches to ricochet around and gain more speed to strike and deal significant damage. So, going on from there, we head over to the next person that Luffy fights and will take inspiration from, and this is where I think the new form comes in. So, for those of you that aren't aware, in Japanese mythology and a lot of East Asian mythology, the natural-born enemies of dragons is tigers. And so, I think the next form is going to be called Gear 4 Tiger Man. Aesthetically, I don't have 100% of an idea of how this would look or work. I could definitely see that maybe Luffy is just using Armament Haki on his joints to sort of give himself that same sort of boosts like he has with his Gear 4 strikes and stuff like that. So he still hits significantly hard. But using Rio, he'll be taking that excess Haki that's wasted, that we know is wasted with Bound Man and Snake Man, and using that to use Rio-based strikes. So you might ask, where do I get the inspiration that this next form, that I'm calling Tiger Man for now, comes from in Enies Lobby? And that is in the form of Rob Lucci. Rob Lucci, leopards and tigers I know are very different animals, but in terms of just looking at the way Rob Lucci fought, and how that was Luffy's physically most intimidating opponent pre-time skip, it makes a lot of sense that Luffy would sort of draw those inspirations from him to fight his post-time skip most physically dominating opponent so far. And so one of the attacks that Rob Lucci does do is the Rokogu gun. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, butchering it like crazy, but essentially it's a strike where he uses his tail to grab Luffy, wrap him up, and does a double fist strike to send a projectile through Luffy, very similar to Rio or Advanced Armament Haki. And so my current thought process is with that is following Luffy's use of Gear 4 and how it's reflective of villains and people he fought pre-time skip being adapted into his new moveset now that he's actually able to incorporate Haki. I think the same will happen with his new form, Tiger Man. And so you might be sitting there going, okay, that makes a little sense, maybe not. And I think one of the biggest things to actually help support this is going back to Bounce Man and how I thought Bounce Man is an all-round form. I think Oda teased in that form a bit of Tiger Man, the same that he teased Snake Man. And so you actually see in Gear 4 Bounce Man, Luffy use Python and Culverin, these Snake Man based attacks, but in that form. They were a little toned down there and not as fast, but they still worked on a very similar premise. And so my thought process here is the same thing again. In that form, even if Luffy has only just recently thought of it, I feel like Oda was teasing it back then, and that is the Leo Bazooka, where Luffy uses a palm-based strike to hit Doflamingo. Now, you might look at that and actually everything might sort of fall in line for you, where you actually see that move, and it's similar to how we've seen Rio used outside of Wano everywhere, and even inside of Wano. It's always, except for Luffy, has been shown as a flat palm strike, and I think Luffy's new form will be based a lot more on that, where he's not as hakied up around the whole body, but he's in very specific areas where he needs it. This might come across looking sort of like tiger stripes. And so the important takeaway would be he's doing more palm-based strikes while fighting. So you could definitely see the sort of cinematic genius of it there, where you have Luffy taking all these skills and that he learned pre-time skip, incorporating his new Haki that he has into a new form, and then aesthetically going, okay, now we have Luffy, Gear 4 Tiger Man versus Kaido the Dragon. And so it becomes this sort of mythological battle there, also entwining with the Neo, the wisdom god. And so I think I could say very clearly that I'm sort of expecting this to happen at this point in time, and I really think that this is the pathway it's going to go. That being said, if you've got any thoughts or opinions that you want to share on the matter, feel free to comment them in the comment section down below, or come join the Discord. The link's in the description below. You can always talk to me and other people about all sorts of anime and manga. Nothing but love and respect, hopefully. And apart from that, have a lovely day. Till next time.